Some illegal miners in Stilfontein say they are being abused by mine leaders underground, especially when they try to leave the shaft. This comes after more zamas have surfaced today from a shaft in the northwest. They have since been arrested. Retrieval operations, however, have ground to a halt today, but law enforcement agencies are still on the ground.
Ungathola sometimes anti abanye abantu bafuna bayafa indlela abantu. Sometimes umuntu uzabe aya khona apha kwabaphathi bezimayini lezi ayocela ukudla, so makathi ucela ukudla and then abaphathi bala ezansi bamshaye. Sometimes umuntu lo ugula kakhulu agcina seshona, and sometimes ukuthi you'll find ukuthi some others bazama ukusurvive ngokuphuma, and then nabaphathi bamayini sometimes babashaye futhi. So izibhlungu into ezenzakala lapha abantu. Into emnandi noba uyabawunjwa amaphumayo kungcono ingasineki ukuthi uzofela la. Hey baba, besingayazi nokuthi iChristmas. Mina ngizame ukuphume Friday, ya ukusuka Friday, and then sikungwana bengifika manje beningayazi nokuthi iChristmas.
Now, for an update on the situation in Stilfontein, I'm now joined by Sabelo Mguni, who's the National Administrator at the Mining Affected Communities United in Action, and Joe Bluin, who's a human rights scholar and PhD candidate. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. A very Merry Christmas to you both, but not so much of a merry one, Sabelo, to those who are out in Stilfontein. What's the general sentiment in the Stilfontein community, especially on Christmas Day? How are people coping with the uncertainty associated with this situation?
No, thanks, Katlego, for having us. Merry Christmas to those who are enjoying it. So, yeah, the general sense in Kuma, to be specific, remember those who are at Shaft 11 who are part of the same community. So, family members who are connected, who are related to those who are still underground, the situation is they are not in a happy mood, if one can say. They are it's a more of anxiety. They are having anxiety, not knowing when the loved ones will return, not knowing if they are still alive or what is their condition. So, yeah, it is a situation of a blue Christmas, if one can say.
Joe, you were on site yesterday, in fact. How do you define the human rights issues at play in this situation of the illegal miners in Stilfontein? And also, how do you reconcile the legality of mining operations with the human rights of individuals engaged in illegal mining? Is there a moral obligation to protect these miners despite their status?
Hi, Katlego. Thank you for having us on the show, and greetings to your viewers at home, and Hanukkah and Christmas greetings too. It's a great question, and I think that it calls into question two things. And the first is how we think of the concept of legality itself. And I was thinking of it today being Christmas Day. Jesus was considered illegal, apartheid was considered legal. So actually, I think one of the things that's really crucial here is to think about the language, because once we start to talk about certain people as being illegal, it immediately kind of goes into racist and xenophobic tropes where some people are doing illegal things. It criminalizes blackness. And as we know, in critical ways, the mining architecture in South Africa, the blood and sweat of apartheid labor, is premised on deeply illegal things. As to the human rights question, I mean, we are seeing mass human rights violations. We are seeing starvation, lack of access to food, denial of access to food, obfuscation of access to food, access to life-saving medicines, antiretroviral medications. We are seeing, if you look at from a human rights perspective, we need to ask who is considered human in this conversation. If you look at the Human Convention, if you look at the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, people have a right to life, a right to dignity. And what is happening not only to the miners and those trapped underground, but to their families is an absolute subjugation of human beings and a mass violation of human rights.
So, Joe, I mean, you speak of labeling certain persons as illegal that could border on xenophobia and racism, but where do we draw the line when it comes to acts of illegality that are performed by certain people?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I think that's one that has been grappled with for a very long time. But I think one of the problems in certainly how, we look at, and I know that Newzroom has been at the site, every day. And these are people who, we're in a context where we're facing an austerity crisis. There's mass unemployment. The obligation rested on Stilfontein Mining Company to not abandon a shaft, to not leave this environmental degradation, and not leave the communities to have to do the work of picking up the pieces that are, in fact, the mining company's responsibility and the state's responsibility to provide rescue. So I hear what you're saying, but I think very often people tend to label those who they don't agree with, those who they consider lesser than Black working class women, as doing illegal things or being illegal, when in fact we need to think about how these are people making a living in the context of the afterlives, where we know our mining industry has seen, Americana is fresh in our memories. And so I think that we need to really be very careful in terms of how we use these terms. And for example, just to sort of think about this another way, we know that some of the miners who have been rescued and emerged, who have been incarcerated, have not been allowed access to legal counsel. That is a violation of the Constitution and the rights of prisoners. So I think these are things that really do need to be considered before kind of launching into potentially very inflammatory, quite populist rhetoric that really, if we are not careful as members of society, as members of the media, really can give rise to the conditions of possibility for very dangerous violence.
Sabel, I mean, Joe raises a point there of Stilfontein, the mining company. How does this incident sort of just highlight the broader issues in the mining industry? What reforms do you think are needed to prevent such tragedies from happening in the near future?
No, just so one. First things first, we have a problem of implementation in the state. We've got MPRT, which is clear in terms of what needs to happen when mine cease to operate. It does have guidance to say in the mine closure, how should the mine be decommissioned, how the mine should be closed. And currently what it says also, it says before a mine closure certificate is issued by the department, the mine holder, certificate holder, or the permit holder bear the responsibility, the environmental responsibility, the socio-economic responsibility up until they receive the mine closure certificate. So what is happening in Stilfontein mine is the mine left the shaft derelict or abandoned, so to say, without rehabilitating or even attempting to rehabilitate. So the responsibility lies with them. Generally, the issue with the state and the cooperative, in particular in the mining sector, is the issue of compliance. There's so much non-compliance. There's non-compliance with all the license conditions, with the legislation that we have as a country in terms of regulating as to how big mining companies or a mining should take place. We've got MPRTA, we've got National Environmental Management Act, which is there's non-compliance. In the department or in the state side of things, the state is continuously paid to ensure there's monitoring first things first. They ensure that secondly there is compliance. They ensure that they hold mining companies to account. So at the moment we are sitting at 6,000 plus derelict mines on less opened abandoned shafts in South Africa, whereas the state is sitting. But then once former mining workers or so-called zamas without having any alternative skills, having any alternative economy. They find themselves going back to those shafts. Then the state to run away from its lack of accountability, from its lack of ensuring there is compliance. They criminalize the problem. They say now the problem is a criminal element. Again, it emphasizes what my fellow comrade said earlier on, the issue of framing, the wording, the references that we use. We talk about illegal mining. Big corporate companies are conducting illegal mining. There are companies that are operating without mining licenses. There are companies that are not adhering to Employment Equity Act in South Africa. They are not complying with even their social and labor plans as a condition as to how they should develop the communities, how they should develop their employees. They abandon everyone when they start moving, and the state is not doing anything about it. So, Stilfontein, it's a highlight of what we've been saying as Makua for the past 12 months, to say, first, the artisanal space is a space that one can benefit as a country. The national economy can benefit. The local economy can benefit. The local communities can benefit. Because one, when mining companies leave their operations, it's not because the minerals are depleted. It's because it's not profitable for them. So it also highlights that space that at this moment in time, the state seems like it's not willing to come to the table to say, let's try to formalize the sector and ensure it does have regulations and protocols. The issue of criminal elements that we are seeing happening in other communities where there's artisanal mining happening, we'll be seeing it. If we can use Kimberley, for example, Kimberley, there are zamas there who are working with permits as a pilot project. There are no same issues that we see in other areas where there is no permit that is issued. So for us, in review, what is happening in Stilfontein as an investor is to say the state is sleeping on its job, particularly the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. That department is failing to regulate and ensure there is compliance within the mining sector.
Sabelo, we seem to be losing you there a bit. Your line is not so clear. But Joe, with what Sabelo is saying, what are then your thoughts on the potential legalization of illegal mining activities? Could a regulated approach provide better protections for miners while addressing safety and legal concerns?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely. I mean, I think that we need to think of artisanal mining like many different sectors of South African society and economy as part of an informal economy, and that I absolutely do think that, and I think that. More and more, as we know, that what my comrade Sabelo was saying, this, when we were there yesterday, the police are treating it as a crime scene. It's not a crime scene. This is upwards of 800 desperate human beings stuck, unable to get out, without a rescue mission from the state. And so I think we need to take into account, first of all, the fact that we are talking about people who are looking for livelihoods, and to criminalize a way of looking for livelihoods is a particular form of racial capitalist violence. And I think that's the first thing. I think that's the first thing. And I think that, the second thing is just also to think about why is it that those who are profiting the least from this industry are being subject to this criminalization, as opposed to those, whether it's in the state or in the mining companies that, or in various groupings that are really profiting extortionately from this. So yes, absolutely, I would agree.
And would it not then be nipping it at the bud, at the start of the value chain, where you do have miners who are going underground and sourcing these minerals, then be a starting point for those who ultimately do benefit along the line of that very same value chain? Because you're asking, why are we not also just looking at those who are profiting the most out of this illegal mining?
Look, let's come back to illegal mining again. But yeah, I mean, I think there's, and then I would really trust my comrades from Makua and those who are directly there. But I think what we're seeing is really an abandonment, and so I think it really calls on a restructuring. We are living through a very desperate economic time globally, and is feeling the fallout from that. And what I think is increasingly clear is the kind of neoliberal dream that was sold, this of ways of being is really and truly marginalizing, further impoverishing, and as we speak, literally resulting in a coordinated killing of people stuck underground. So I think the question is bigger. I think it is, how do we imagine an economy that is not structured where we place profit over people? How do we imagine an economy where we understand human rights, the human in human rights, to refer to all humans, not just wealthy humans, not just white humans? And I think these are the bigger, more pressing questions. But in the interim, I mean, I really do think that if we don't have a rescue mission. We are, between Makua and the Stilfontein Crisis Committee and various solidarity organizations, including many associated with the pro-Palestine movement, are kind of pushing together to make this happen in absentia of a state that is performing its role. And I think that's the kind of question of legality we should be asking.
And just on that still, Joe, I mean, the Minister of Police had dismissed allegations of human rights violations and saying that maintaining the government's priority remains that of enforcing law and ensuring the safety of the public as a whole. How important is it for government to be aiding food and just overall assistance to these miners that are underground?
I mean, it's crucial. It's absurd that it has not happened. We were there yesterday. There is a fundraiser where we are relying on the goodwill and solidarity and at the moment Christmas spirit of many people to do collections to just try and provide basic necessities. You have people that have HIV that do not have access to antiretrovirals. There is food, water, hygiene requirements, basic needs, medicines. So it is absolutely absurd that we are relying on a kind of the goodwill of humans. I mean, it's inspiring, but this is the government's job. And not only the provision of aid, but also a rescue operation.
Right.
And yeah, if anyone does, please Google Back a Buddy Stilfontein Emergency Miner Response, and if you want to make a contribution in absentia of a state that is doing its job, that would be most welcome.
Sabelo, maybe just to close it off, we do know that retrieval operations have since been halted. Are you looking at resuming these possibly in the near future?
Yes, definitely. Yes, we are looking to continue to retrieve and send food whenever food is available. So, as the Comrade Joe is saying, we are raising funds, we are calling for everyone. So, once we gather all the resources, we continue to work. When one looks at the judgment, the previous judgment, the one that we had on the 20th, it doesn't prohibit the community risk cooperation to continue to operate. So we continue working on those conditions that will operate Monday to Friday from 8 to 4. Whenever there are resources, whenever we can, if the rope is available, we continue to do so. But definitely we are continuing, and we are continuing to call for solidarity, particularly those who are in a position of power, so to say, where they can influence certain decisions to be taken in the absence of civil society organization putting pressure. But generally, yes, we are continuing.
All right, Sabelo Mnguni, the National Administrator at Makua, as well as Joe Bluen, who's a human rights scholar. Thank you so much for your time and for your contributions this afternoon.